Great. Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to be here with you. It's great to be here for this Midwest Farm Boy, to be back here in the Midwest, to be with you here today. Got to say thank you for Monty, Devin, for really warming up the weather. It's great to get a reminder of what it's like to be back here in the Midwest. But I have to tell you, it's really exciting for me to be here and to be here with a group of biofuel producers and those that are working in the industry that are creating jobs, promoting our energy independence, and contributing to a cleaner environment. And so it really is great for me to be here. Here in Iowa, you all know the importance of biofuels and how important that is to farmers and the economy. Renewable fuels supports over 43,000 jobs here in Iowa, accounting for 3.5% or $4.6 billion of Iowa's GDP and generating $2.3 billion of income for Iowans. 53% of Iowa's corn here is used in ethanol production and contributing to 4.1 billion gallons of ethanol that Iowa produces. And Iowa is producing 30% of our nation's ethanol. We also know that, of course, the Iowa's 11 biodiesel plants have the capacity and are producing around 400 million gallons of biodiesel. All of that adds to the prosperity of farmers and ranchers. We know that if we have Iowa's ethanol and biodiesel plants running, we know that farmers can be prospering. We know that we're contributing to our energy independence and that we're contributing to a much cleaner environment. You heard Devin said I grew up from Minnesota, and I know that you Iowans like to sometimes make fun of us from Minnesota, but you know there are some things that I will say that we have in common. We have many times long cold winters. A number of people in both states like to go out ice fishing, and we also like to tell Ole and Lena jokes. And so it is in that spirit I wanted to share with you that Ole was building a new fish house. And he asked his friend Sven to come help him put up the siding on the fish house. And as he and Sven were working on the siding, he noticed that Sven, when he would pull a nail out of his pouch, sometimes he'd drive it into the siding, other times he'd look at it and he'd throw it over his shoulder and throw it away. Ole said, "Sven, what are you doing?" Sven said, "Well, when I pull a nail out of the pouch, if it's facing toward the fish house, I pound it in. If it's facing toward me, I throw it over my shoulder because it's defective." Ole said, "Sven, you idiot, don't you know that the nails pointing toward you are for the siding on the other side of the fish house?" Also in that vein, you know that Ole and Lena, Ole loved to go to air shows. And they were at an air show, and there was a pilot advertising that he would take people up for a free ride. Ole asked him how much it was going to be for the ride, and the pilot said, "Well, it's $50 for 10 minutes. Well, Ole, being the cheapskate that he was, thought that was too much, so he said no, they weren't going to pay that. Well, the quick-thinking pilot said, "Well, I tell you what, I'll take you and your wife up in the plane, and if you don't say a word, if I don't hear a sound, you don't owe me nothing. But if you make a sound, then you pay me the $50. Well, Ole thought that was an good deal, so he and Lena climbed into the plane, they went up, and the pilot took them on a wild ride. He did loop-to-loops, and he did barrel rolls, and he didn't hear a sound the whole time. So as they were approaching to land, he called back and he said, "I have to tell you, you're a very brave man, Ole." And Ole said, "Yeah, thank you, but I got to be honest with you, I almost screamed a while back when Lena fell out." I want to talk today a little bit about Biofuels Innovation in America, talk about the President Trump's biofuel agenda and what I see coming up on the future, as well as on trade. When I think about innovation in the biofuels industry, I have to say that biofuels are not what they used to be. And in many times that can be, somewhat derogatory and fighting words, but for us in the biofuels industry, that's actually a very good thing. Continued research and development that has been going on in the biofuel sector and the farming sector has really contributed to a cleaner burning product with less energy used in production. Farmers have become much more productive, using less land to grow more corn and soybeans. We're proud at the Department of Agriculture that we are working with the industry, working with farmers, and contributing to that. Last year, USDA released a study that found that the greenhouse gas emissions from corn ethanol are 39% lower than gasoline on an energy equivalent basis, and that's increasing every year. Farmers are producing more efficiently, using conservation practices that are lowering emissions and adding to the efficiency. The most recent study that USDA has done of the energy balance of corn ethanol production indicates that the average facility produces between 2.1 and 2.3 units of energy for every unit of energy input. Some plants in Iowa that are using the dried distillers' grains or wet distillers' grains to the local livestock industry and then sell their ethanol fuel more locally actually have an energy units of over four units for every one of input used. And I think we're very fortunate that we see that many countries around the world are really starting to see the very positive benefits of ethanol and biofuels. Countries like Colombia, Peru, India, Japan, Brazil, Canada, the European Union, and others are all developing or expanding their policies promoting the use of biofuels. The environmental benefits of biofuels are really help driving this expansion. And that's one of the things that I think we in agriculture, and certainly you're going to be hearing a lot more from us at the Department of Agriculture, want to be talking about, is that agriculture is the solution for our sustainability goals that we have in this country and around the world. Agriculture can contribute very positively for meeting our sustainability goals, our climate goals that we want to do, and biofuels can play a very large portion of that. USDA, we're working and we're proud to play a vital role in that agriculture sustainability through the cutting-edge research that we're doing, as well as the implementation of that research in our programs and working with farmers and ranchers to put that on the ground. We are researching ways, just as one example, to use biofuels to replace jet fuel. We have our 5 regional USDA biomass research centers that were established in 2010, where we're studying how biomass production can improve the biorefining process, and we really see that as a great way to go in the future as well. I want to talk for a few minutes about President Trump's biofuel agenda and the trade policies. And I think after I know what have been some very tough times in the industry, I believe that there's really some very positive things that are happening that are going to be great for the biofuel sector as we look out into the future. One, of course, is you know that this last year, President Trump granted year-round use of E15. This has been a years-long effort that went on in the industry to try to get the U.S. EPA to move forward with allowing year-round sales of E15, and we're very pleased that President Trump took that action not quite a year ago to allow year-round sales in E15. Number 2, as you know, this last fall, the President brokered and announced an agreement on biofuels that really addresses the small refinery waivers that were being given. And under this agreement, of course, key for the biofuel industry, it was something that all of us have been urging the EPA to do, and that is to project the number of waivers, the number of small refinery waivers that they were going to be issuing, and have them do that so that those projected waiver gallons would be added back in and redistributed to everybody else, and so that we did have a volume requirement that actually was meaningful. We're very pleased that that was done, and I think that's going to be very positive for the industry going forward. I realize that there were some folks that, of course, and we know that would have preferred for the EPA to use the average of the past 3 years of waivers rather than the average of the past 3 years of whatever the Department of Energy was recommending for the amount of those waivers. But I'm here to tell you that it's okay that EPA in their final rule use the average of the DOE recommendations. Number one, and that's because President Trump and Administrator Wheeler have both said that 15 billion gallons means 15 billion gallons, and 2.43 billion gallons of biodiesel means 2.43 billion gallons of biodiesel. So it doesn't matter that whether EPA is projecting the average of the last 3 years, say of ethanol of around 1.4 billion gallons of waivers and redistributing that so that you achieve 15 billion gallons, or if they're projecting that it was more around 600 million gallons that the DOE had recommended. As long as the eventual number of waivers don't exceed the projections, we will achieve 15 billion gallons and 2.43 billion gallons. And that's what President Trump and Administrator Wheeler have committed to. It's something that we're pleased about those commitments, and it's something that I know that you are as well. The other benefit that I think that we have of the EPA using the average DOE recommendations is something that is going to benefit us, of course, for the 2019 compliance year. Of course, the agreement that was brokered applies to 2020 and moving forward, but we still have the waivers that are yet to occur for the 2019 compliance year. And I think having the EPA, which they did in their rule, commit that they're going to be following and be guided by those DOE recommendations is actually very good, so that this spring, when EPA is approaching the small refiner waiver requests that they have, they're going to be guided by DOE recommendations rather than the larger volumes that they had been done in the past. And I think that's really a side benefit that we have from the from EPA agreeing to use DOE recommendations. The other part of the program that we're very excited about at USDA that was part of the announcement that the President announced back in the fall was that USDA would be moving forward with a program to incentivize and build out biofuels infrastructure. And just today, the Department of Agriculture, we announced in the Federal Register a request for information where we're seeking input from the industry on how we can best implement that program. Our goal is to build out that infrastructure. What can we do? What can we do to both build out the infrastructure and incentivize the retailers to be offering higher blends of both ethanol and biodiesel so that we can have that market demand? Because that's what all of us in this room want. We want the market to be driving, and just think about what will happen if we have, rather than a little over an average of 10% inclusion rate in our gasoline supply, of having 15% or more in the future. I think as we are going to be seeking those comments, we are asking for your good input on how we can best implement this program. We're looking as we move forward with a very robust program that's going to be implemented yet this year to get started on that, because we think that is needed to move forward with the industry, and I think that's going to be very positive. The fourth area that I want to just touch upon, and that's on expanding biofuels use worldwide and on trade. And there, you know, while we're working on expanding biofuel use here in the United States, we're also working at the Department of Agriculture and with our U.S. Trade Representative around the world to create those opportunities. I'm so pleased that here today, and you're going to be hearing from him a little bit later today, we have our Administrator of the Foreign Agricultural Service, Ken Isley, is here, and he's going to be talking about some of those opportunities that exist in those foreign markets. But I can tell you that we've already achieved some very good deals that are very good and I think point to a very positive future for the biofuels industry as we work overseas. As you know, just on January 1st, we implemented the U.S.-Japan Free Trade Agreement. And as part of that agreement, we've removed the tariff on ethanol that was going into Japan. And so that creates a market opportunity. Just about 20 minutes ago, I'm proud to say that the Senate finally passed the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement on a vote of 89 to 10. And so, yeah, let's clap for that. That creates more opportunity, not only for biofuels, but of course for the farm products that are so important to our farmers and ranchers. It really helps add to the certainty in the trade environment and helps move us forward. And then I want to say that yesterday was a very, very big day in Washington. It's something that all of us in agriculture had been hoping for, and that is that the President signed a Phase 1 trade deal with China. I'm really optimistic. I think it's going to be spectacular for our farmers and ranchers, really addresses a lot of things. For the agriculture component of that Phase 1 deal, really has two components. One is it has some structural reforms. It addresses some of the long-standing structural barriers that China has had in place that have kept our products out of the Chinese market. And these structural barriers have been in place for years and sometimes decades, and finally they are being addressed in this agreement. China has agreed to register our plants, remove unfair health and safety restrictions that have kept our products out, and agree to act within certain time frames in terms of registering plants, making safety determinations so that we can actually export our products over to China. The second part of the deal, and this is something that I'm really excited about as well, is that China has committed to purchase over an $80 billion worth of U.S. agriculture and seafood commodities over the next 2 years. This next year, China has committed that they will be purchasing $36.5 billion, and the following year, $43.5 billion worth of agriculture products. To put that in perspective, in 2017, China was our #1 market in the world for U.S. agriculture products, and we exported $24 billion worth of agriculture products to China. So to go from $24 billion, that was before the tariff retaliation occurred, to go from $24 billion up to $36.5, up to $43.5, that is a very good deal. And that's going to have really major impacts across the board for a host of commodities, not only soybeans and corn, pork, beef, poultry, but also specialty crops, tree nuts, ethanol, dried distillers grains, pet food. It all is going to really add up and be distributed across the board if China is going to reach those kinds of levels. And so I really look for very good things to come from that. Of course, we're going into this very clear-eyed. We're going to be monitoring China's purchases very closely and holding their feet to the fire to make sure that it comes into place. We also want to tell you that we are also doing promotions around the world as well, working day to day. Our posts that USDA and our Foreign Agricultural Service has around the world, the funding that we're making available to groups to promote biofuels, all very, very important for the future of the industry. This fall, I had USDA provided funding support for and was proud to support the U.S. Grains Council as they held their global Ethanol Summit, which brought together buyers from around the world. Then took them on a tour here around 12 Midwestern states so that they could actually see the production. And we think that kind of outreach that takes place of working with foreign buyers, having them, making sure that we're conveying to them that U.S. ethanol, U.S. biofuels, U.S. biodiesel is available to help meet their environmental goals and their energy needs is very, very important to do. I want to close by saying that we also want to make sure that we're continuing to hear from you. We think it's important at USDA. I can tell you that Secretary Perdue, myself, Bill Northey, our Undersecretary for Farm Production and Conservation, an Iowan himself, longtime Secretary of Agriculture here in Iowa, and all of us at USDA are very eager to hear from you how we can move forward and what we need to be doing to make sure that we're serving the needs of America's farmers, ranchers, rural communities, and agriculture industry. We promise that we're going to be listening. We don't want to be, speaking of listening, we don't want to be like the man that complained about his wife who said, I don't think she hears as good as she used to, when he went to the doctor for his annual checkup. And the doctor said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that, but I tell you what, I'll give you a little test. When you go home tonight, why don't you start out about 30 feet behind her and say something in a normal voice, and if she doesn't hear you, keep on moving forward until she hears you, and then the next time you come in for your checkup, you can tell me about how far you were away, and I'll have a better sense of whether she has any kind of hearing issues. And so the man went home that evening, and he walked in the door, and his wife was standing at the stove cooking dinner, and he said, honey, what's for dinner? He didn't hear anything, so he moved forward about 10 feet, and he said it again, honey, what's for dinner? Didn't hear anything. Where he was only a few feet behind her and said, honey, what's for dinner? She turned around and looked at him and she said, for the third time, it's lasagna. We promise we won't be like that man that thought someone else had the hearing problem. We want to hear from you. We want to make sure that we're an advocate at USDA for farmers, ranchers, in the industry, and we'll continue to do that. Great for me to be here with you. It looks like we have just a couple of minutes for any kind of questions. I know that they have some mics set up. We're happy to address any kind of questions that you may have.
Mr. Censky, thank you for coming here today, and it's really great to hear the positive news that you bring to us. I would like to follow up on one of the things I would like to see is more transparency in these small refinery exemptions. With 4.3 billion gallons that have been waived and granted in the past, and RINs only being a fraction of what they were 4 to 5 years ago, I feel there should be more transparency. What companies are getting these small refinery exemptions and why?
Yeah, and I hear you, and I know that that's been one of the great frustrations that I think everyone has had. As I think there will be, I think the good news is that EPA has committed to following the Department of Energy recommendations on a go-forward basis. And so I think, again, that's very positive that they'll be doing that. In terms of announcing, EPA has announced some greater transparency on their announcements about which companies are going to be receiving them at the time that when those are granted. So I think that step, EPA is taking that step in transparency. In terms of the rationale for the granting an individual waiver, I think a lot of that, I got to be honest with you, is still going to be protected because a lot of that information that companies submit is confidential business information. It's protected by confidential business information rules in the statute about, what is their company financial position, what is their situation in the industry, things like that. And so I believe that is still going to be protected on that the why did a company qualify for a small refiner waiver is still going to be protected, but I think going forward, the who is going to be much more transparent.
Over here.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation and your jokes. I appreciated those. Okay, I have an out-of-the-box comment, probably for the people in this group, but I think it's an important comment. I think we're really at a Kodak moment here in Iowa, in the Midwest, and it has to do with the electric vehicle. And just like we saw with our cell phones, these went from about 2 to 80% penetration in about 10 years. We're producing about 500,000 electric vehicles right now. Tesla is the primary producer. We produce about 17 million cars per year in this country. China may want to and be able to buy some of our foreign products here next 3 or 4 years. China is looking to go to electric vehicles in a big way. And so I think the Department of Agriculture needs to be working with our state Department of Agriculture and figure out what we're going to do besides growing corn and beans for ethanol. We can either be proactive or we can be reactive. And I think it's one of the most important points in my lifetime we're facing right now. So I'd be interested in any comments you have, but one of my thoughts is we need to diversify. We can't continue to just produce corn and beans and hogs. We're going to be in a really difficult situation if we continue down this path. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that question. And agree, as we know that technology is ever changing. Marketplace is ever changing, and that's something that we recognize as a fact of life. And certainly, as we have seen the increase in the use of electric vehicles, that has an impact on the liquid transportation fuels and what is, of course, ethanol's share of that. And so that's something that I think we're very cognizant of. I know the industry is cognizant of as they look to the future. One of the things I can tell you that we're doing at the Department of Agriculture is continuing investing in that diversity, as you had suggested, the diversity of cropping opportunities, what can be done to look for the diverse crops to try to help farmers and ranchers. Also investing in the new uses. We still have tremendous opportunities, frankly, outside of the transportation industry. But you take a look at in the petroleum-based products that are used in our everyday products today. There's tremendous opportunities for agriculture, for bio-based products, commodities to be used in that. And we're doing really some cutting-edge research, and we see that as one of the keys to the future as well. But your point is very well taken, and it's something that we're committed to continuing to fund that research. It's something that I know Secretary Perdue, myself, and others, we believe very strongly about the power of agricultural research. Many times it's tempting to take the, to want to say, let's put the dollars in almost for the immediate need, and certainly there is the need for that, for the farm safety net, and things like that, but there also is the need to do that long-term research, to make those long-term investments that are going to pay dividends 5, 10, and even 30 years down the road. Okay, one more question if it's short.
Thank you, Mr. Censky, for joining us today. I know how busy you guys are, but I had a question. A couple months ago, I testified in front of the Energy and Commerce Committee, our SREs, and at that hearing, the oil industry was making the comments that, like you said, about their confidentiality and not being able to share the information to prove that they're actually having hardships to be having these SREs granted to them. But, you know, as a farmer, everybody, I made the comment, everybody in the room, you go online and see what we've received for subsidies over our farming careers. So I don't really see the fair playing field there with the oil industry and agriculture. You know, we have to disclose that information, so why doesn't the oil industry have to? You know, I'd love to see that USDA pressure the EPA to get that a little more transparent than just telling us who they're granting them to. It'd be nice to know why they're getting granted SREs. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and appreciate that, and again, it's something that I think we will be seeing some more transparency, but I think there will be some of those restrictions on confidential business information. But I do think we're the point that we want to get to for all of us, and that's, I guess, the point that I want to go back to. And while we're excited about the biofuel infrastructure incentive program that we're going to be rolling out, is working with you all in the industry of what do we need to do to drive that commercial demand that can be out there in the marketplace so that both the retailers as well as consumers know that they can be buying biodiesel, E15, and even higher blends, and it's in their economic interest to offer that and to buy that, and we won't be as dependent on the renewable fuel standard as we move forward, and the waivers won't be as meaningful in the future as we go forward. That's the end goal I know all of us want to get to, and we're excited about the program. We look forward to your comments. Thank you again for this invitation to join you today. I want to wish you good luck and really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.